Imagine preparing for an imminent looming war. You know, the tension is just palpable, the maps are laid out on the table, the troops are moving.
Right. The stakes are as high as they get.
Exactly. And right in the middle of this massive existential crisis, your defense minister issues this direct categorical order. Destroy the paper trail.
Wow.
Yeah. No meeting minutes are to be kept, zero official records of who said what. So if things go completely sideways, legally, no one in the room is responsible.
Which is just, I mean, that's wild.
Right. It sounds like a plot from some political thriller, but that is exactly what actually happened in India in 1962.
Yeah, it really did.
Because, you know, we always think of national outcomes, like these massive geopolitical shifts or military defeats, as being decided by, like, troop numbers or the terrain or the quality of the weapons.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really unpack the history, those outcomes are dictated by the blind spots, the paranoia, and just the deeply human decisions of the people sitting around the table.
Oh, 100%. It is entirely about the people. I mean, the machinery of a state is really only as good as the operators at the controls.
Right.
And what we are looking at today is this absolutely fascinating operational review of the 1962 military reverses that India suffered against China.
Yeah, and to be clear, we aren't just recounting biographies today.
No, not at all. We are conducting an institutional autopsy here.
I like that phrasing.
Yeah, because if we really want to understand how a nation stumbles, we have to look at the specific positions these leaders held, right? The deeply flawed assumptions they brought into the room, the actual decisions they made, and, well, the massive impact of those choices.
Welcome to today's deep dive. So our mission today is to answer a central question for you, the listener. How exactly do individual decisions and, you know, the culture within an institution ultimately dictate survival?
It's a huge question.
It really is. And it brings to mind this formula that we're going to keep coming back to as we dig through these documents. It's essentially personality plus power plus judgment equals historical impact.
That is the perfect framework for this.
Yeah, and when you look at the historical photograph included in our source material, right, you see this mid-century military officer. He's got the stern mustache, the heavy metals, the pristine uniform.
Yeah, very classic look.
It just reminds you that these were flesh and blood human beings burdened with, like, monumental choices. But, okay, let's unpack this. How do we even know what went wrong in those rooms if the meeting minutes were banned?
Well, that is the perfect place to start. We actually know about this because of a massive operational review ordered in December 1962, literally right after the conflict ended.
Oh, wow. So they moved fast.
Yeah, the military essentially had to investigate itself. And the primary figure tasked with this was Lieutenant General Henderson Brooks. He was commanding the 11th Corps at Jandor at the time. Now, for context, an Army Corps is a massive operational formation. So he brings, serious logistical and field weight to this review.
Right. He's not just a desk guy.
Exactly. He submitted the report in April 1963. But here is the critical friction point with this whole thing. His mandate was restricted.
Yeah, I actually noticed that in the documents. He was supposed to figure out why the Army failed, but he was legally locked out of the Ministry of Defense records.
Right. I mean, just imagine trying to investigate a plane crash, but the airline tells you you can't listen to the cockpit voice recorder.
That's insane.
Or you can't talk to air traffic control. Brooks couldn't formally examine the relationship between the Ministry of Defense and Army headquarters.
Oh, so the civilian side was just off limits.
Completely. He couldn't officially document the massive political interference coming from the defense minister because he simply wasn't allowed access to that level of civilian paperwork.
Which is, incredibly convenient for the politicians who might have been making those terrible decisions.
Very convenient.
So Brooks eventually retired to Australia, passing away in 1999. But he didn't write this foundational report alone, did he?
No, he had a co-author who brings a totally different but vital perspective. Brigadier P.S. Pagat.
Okay, let's talk about him.
Pagat is just a fascinating figure to look at through our analytical lens of position and competence. He wasn't just some bureaucrat.
Right.
He was the director of military intelligence from 1959 to 1961. He was the commandant of the Indian Military Academy. But most importantly,
look at this part.
He was a Victoria Cross winner.
Which is the absolute highest military honor for valor in the face of the enemy.
Exactly. So he brings this undeniable, unshakable professional combat credibility to the review. Nobody could question his courage or his competence.
But the source mentions a detail about Pagat's later career that just feels like a gut punch.
Yeah, it really does.
He goes on to raise the Northern Command, does all this incredible work, but is ultimately bypassed for selection as Army Chief. And he chooses to step out on deputation. You really have to wonder if being the guy who writes the brutally honest autopsy of your own military's failure, essentially puts a ceiling on your career.
Oh, it absolutely often does. And that really highlights our first major leadership lesson for anyone listening.
Let's hear it.
Why do institutions even commission reports like this?
Right.
They do it to identify weaknesses and extract lessons so the system survives the next crisis.
Sure, in theory.
But honest institutional feedback is incredibly threatening to the status quo. Professional competence, like Liggett's, is absolutely required to tell an institution what actually went wrong.
Right.
But the institution has to actually be brave enough to reward that honesty, not, bypass it.
Yeah, they have to actually want to hear the bad news. Okay, so Brooks and Fagot are our lens into this chaos. Let's look at the environment they were investigating.
Let's do it.
If we follow the chain of command all the way to the top, we hit Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, and his worldview heavily dictated the entire decision-making environment. And, this is where the dynamic gets really counterintuitive.
It really does, because the Operational Review's assessment of Nehru's strategy is incredibly stark.
How so?
Well, throughout the 1950s, Nehru assiduously courted China. He poured immense energy into this diplomatic peace approach. And he maintained this posture even after China annexed Tibet.
Which was historically the crucial buffer state between the two massive nations.
Exactly. The buffer was gone, but the diplomacy just continued.
And this is the part of the autopsy that I really want to unpack, because the structural assumptions go much deeper than just, hoping for peace.
Right, there's a darker layer to it.
The document suggests that the people around Nehru exploited his profound paranoia of a military coup.
Yes, this is key.
Because of that fear, the government essentially operated on the assumption that a large, well-equipped standing army just wasn't needed. They thought a police force could just keep the peace on the borders.
I know it seems completely baffling in hindsight, but you really have to understand the geopolitical context of that era.
Set the scene for us.
Okay, so newly independent nations all over the world were seeing their civilian governments overthrown by their own militaries. That fear was literally in the water.
Oh, so it wasn't just a baseless phobia.
No, not at all. So Nehru's advisors exploit this. The assumption takes root. If we build up the military, they become a threat to us. Let's rely on diplomacy instead.
I have to push back on the logic there, though.
Go for it.
Even if that fear is valid internally, if your strategic worldview is driven entirely by internal paranoia, fearing your own generals, doesn't that inherently compromise your national security?
Absolutely.
If you border a massive, expanding power, you can't just wish away the need for an army.
You're completely right. And that's the tragedy the Henderson-Brooks report really highlights. It's the ultimate collision between diplomatic idealism and security realism.
Right.
Because Nehru assumed diplomacy would hold, he just didn't prepare the country. He misjudged Chinese designs completely.
Wow.
And this all culminates in October 1962, when Nehru makes a public announcement ordering this under-equipped, totally unprepared army to, quote, free our territory.
Wait, he literally ordered them to attack and drive the Chinese back.
Yes.
With an army he specifically kept weak.
Precisely. And the outcome was just devastating. The review notes that Nehru felt completely betrayed by the Chinese response.
Of course he did. His whole worldview shattered.
Yeah, he became entirely disillusioned with his lifelong philosophy of non-alignment. He died a broken man just 3 years later.
That is so tragic.
It is. And the leadership lesson here is really about strategic stability. Diplomatic objectives, seeking peace, are noble and they are necessary.
Sure.
But a peace approach must be balanced with prepared capability. If you can't actually defend the peace, you are just inviting a crisis.
You can't write a check. Your military capability can't cash.
Exactly.
But Nehru wasn't sitting in a room alone making these decisions, right? He had advisors who validated these blind spots.
Oh, yes. He definitely did.
Yeah. Which brings us to V.K. Krishna Menon, the defense minister who had been in office since 1957. The autopsy describes him as a brilliant but waspish man who was essentially Nehru's biggest blind spot.
Menon is a classic case study in how a toxic leadership style can just rot an institution from the inside out.
Tell me about it.
His core belief, his unshakable assumption, was that China would never attack India. Period.
Just a hard rule in his mind.
Yes. So based on that fatally flawed assumption, He viewed the military's request for better equipment or preparation as mere fear-mongering.
Right. If you firmly believe the neighbor is friendly, the guy asking for a stronger lock on the door just looks paranoid and annoying.
Exactly. So Menon routinely insulted the surface chiefs. He played favorites with promotions, elevating people who agreed with him rather than those who were actually competent.
Ugh, the classic yes men scenario.
Yes, he deeply politicized the professional army.
Which brings us back to that staggering detail we opened with, the documentation crisis.
Oh, this is the worst part.
Menon ordered that absolutely no minutes be kept for the top-secret conferences regarding the operations.
None.
I'm trying to imagine this in a modern context. Imagine if your company was facing a hostile takeover or a massive product launch, and the CEO explicitly banned anyone from writing down what was decided in the board meetings.
Right.
It deliberately destroys accountability.
It completely dismantles the architecture of responsibility, and the operational review points this out explicitly.
Because there's no proof.
Exactly. Because there was no paper trail, it absolved anyone in the ultimate analysis of responsibility for major decisions. When the disaster happened, nobody could prove who ordered what.
Wow, it's the judgment part of our formula. Personality, power, judgment. When your judgment is to erase the record just to protect your own ego, the impact is structural collapse.
Spot on. And this gives us a very clear model for what a healthy civil-military relationship should actually look like.
What's the model?
It requires three things: clear political direction, honest professional advice, and objective capability assessments.
Okay, that makes sense.
But none of that can exist without transparent, documented processes. You simply cannot run a national security apparatus based on the undocumented, personality-driven whims of a single minister.
Okay, so if the defense minister is burying the paperwork and the prime minister is leaning entirely on diplomacy, how are they getting their information about what's actually happening on the ground?
Well, this introduces the intelligence void and a man named B.N. Mulloch.
Right, BN.
He was the legendary, incredibly powerful director of the Intelligence Bureau, and he held that position for a massive tenure from 1948 all the way to 1964.
So he definitely had the prime minister's ear.
Oh, absolutely. But the Henderson-Brooks report fiercely scrutinizes his role. It directly blames Mulloch for propelling what was called the forward policy.
Okay, let's unpack this forward policy because the mechanics of it sound absolutely wild to me.
They're wild.
Mulloch essentially advises the government to establish isolated police posts, sometimes even behind Chinese lines, just to register a territorial claim on the map.
Yes. And again, look at the assumption driving the decision here. Mulloch operated on the premise that the Chinese would simply not react to Indian maneuvers.
Wait, just pause for a second. How does a police post actually register a claim in a disputed military zone? Were these like heavily armed fortresses?
Not at all. They were lightly armed, isolated outposts.
That's crazy.
Mulloch viewed it as a diplomatic signaling exercise. You plant a flag, you put a few policemen there, and you legally claim the territory.
Without the military.
Exactly. He did this without understanding the operational military reality. He was treating a physical battlefield like a legal chessboard.
So you have these tiny police units sitting out in the freezing cold, surrounded by a foreign military with absolutely zero logistical or combat support from the rear.
Right. And when the conflict broke out, the report states they fell like 9 pins. India was taken completely by surprise because the military wasn't positioned to back up the political posturing.
This raises a massive red flag about organizational roles. What happens when the person whose job is to report the weather decides to start building the house?
That's a great way to put it.
When the intelligence chief shifts from gathering information to actively dictating national policy.
It short-circuits the entire system. The
Well-
intelligence cycle is supposed to be sequential, right?
Right.
Collection of data, analysis of that data, warning the policymakers, and then the policymakers make a decision based on their actual resources.
So what did Mulloch do?
Mulloch skipped the warning phase entirely. He jumped straight into driving unresourced political strategies because, frankly, it aligned with what Nehru and Menon wanted to believe.
Giving the boss what they want.
Exactly. The leadership lesson here is critical. Intelligence must provide objective warnings, not tell the boss what they want to hear while bypassing the people who actually have to fight the war.
Man, this sounds like a perfect storm of dysfunction.
It really is.
You have a prime minister acting on paranoia of his own army, a defense minister erasing the meeting minutes, and an intel chief acting like a military strategist.
That's a nightmare.
What does the actual military command look like in this environment? Who is actually moving the troops?
Well, the documents give us two tragic case studies in military command. Lieutenant General B.M. Call and the Chief of Army Staff, General P.N. Thapar. Let's look at Call first.
Okay.
He was the Chief of General Staff, and on the very eve of the war, he was appointed to command the IV Corps.
Now, the review paints an almost contradictory picture of Call. It says he was a man of exceptional dynamism with ambition that was just off the charts. But there's a massive fatal flaw here. He had absolutely zero experience in combat.
Zero. None. But remember what we discussed earlier about Defense Minister Menon playing favorites?
Oh, right.
Call was Menon's favorite. He was also a distant relative of Nehru.
Unbelievable.
But despite having no field combat experience, he's given the central command role at the absolute worst possible moment.
And the chaos he creates is immediate. The report says he would issue person-to-person signals, completely bypassing the established chain of command.
Yes.
For anyone listening, imagine a corporate structure, right? This is like a senior vice president ignoring the regional directors, ignoring the branch managers, and just calling a frontline cashier directly to change the store layout in the middle of a Black Friday rush.
That is exactly what happened. It paralyzes everyone in the middle.
Yeah.
Call didn't understand the terrain. He lacked operational judgment. And because he had never been tested in combat, he couldn't handle the sheer physical and mental stress of decision-making under fire.
Wow.
He actually collapsed. He fell seriously ill and had to be evacuated from the battlefield back to Delhi.
And this detail, this is where history truly outpaces fiction.
It's absurd.
Despite Call being physically evacuated to a hospital in Delhi, Defense Minister Menon ordered that Call continue to command the active battlefield from his sickbed,
Yeah.
bypassing the officers who were actually standing in the snow. I mean, it is a guaranteed formula for a massacre.
It's the total collapse of operational logic. Now, the natural question here is, where was the adult in the room?
Right. Where was the Chief of Army Staff, General P.N. Thapar, while a sick man in Delhi was trying to command a war in the Himalayas?
Exactly.
If you are the head of the army, isn't your only job in that moment to walk into the defense minister's office, put your stars on the table, and say, "This is madness, I will not allow it"?
Theoretically, yes. That is exactly what you should do. And Thapar wasn't an amateur. He had a massive resume of administrative and peacetime experience.
Okay, so he knew how things worked.
He had been Master General of Ordnance, Military Secretary. He commanded the Southern Command. But peacetime administration is very, very different from wartime command.
Obviously.
The autopsy explicitly states that his institutional position was compromised by his own disposition. He was simply too timid to cross Menon's path.
So even when his subordinate Call is making disastrous, fatal errors in the Northeast, Thapar just stays quiet.
Yep. He won't overrule Call because Call has the political protection of the defense minister.
That is just brutal.
The sheer pressure of the political environment completely neutralized him. I have no doubt Thapar had severe professional disagreements with what was happening, but he just lacked the will to voice them.
Wow.
When the dust settled, both Call and Thapar resigned in absolute disgrace.
So what are the distinct lessons we take away from these two commanders? Because they fail for very different reasons.
They do. They really represent two sides of the military leadership coin.
Okay, break it down for us.
From Call, the lesson is straightforward. The right person must match the right responsibility.
All right.
You cannot substitute field understanding, terrain appreciation, and operational judgment with sheer ambition and political connections.
Dynamism doesn't stop bullets.
Precisely. And from Thapar, we learn perhaps the hardest, most universal lesson of all. Senior leadership requires moral courage.
That's a great phrase. Moral courage.
Having the rank, the medals, and the experience means absolutely nothing if you do not have the moral courage to disagree with flawed political pressure, especially when the lives of your people and the security of your nation are on the line.
Man, let's step back and look at the whole board here.
Yeah.
We've dissected the reviewers, the prime minister, the defense minister, the intel chief, and the military commander.
That's quite a cast of characters.
When you pull all these threads together, what does this institutional autopsy actually reveal?
It reveals incredibly clear, incredibly dangerous, common failure patterns that can destroy literally any organization.
Like what?
First, you see incorrect assumptions treated as undeniable facts, like the belief that China would never attack.
Right.
Second, you see fundamentally weak feedback loops where nobody is allowed to speak the truth to power.
Yeah, you get punished for it.
Third, there is limited debate and terrible coordination, driven by a culture where decisions are made based on personality rather than process.
It perfectly validates our starting formula. Personality plus power plus judgment equals historical impact.
Absolutely.
Because when you take accountability and professional reality out of that equation, when you literally ban the meeting minutes and appoint your inexperienced friends, the impact isn't just a bad fiscal quarter, it's a national tragedy.
It is a masterclass in how institutions fail. But, it also provides a strategic leadership framework for how they can survive.
How so?
If you want to avoid this kind of disaster, whether in government or in business,
Yeah.
you have to follow a few core principles. You have to actively listen to experts, not just sycophants.
Right.
You have to constantly challenge your own baseline assumptions. You must maintain strict accountability, which means keeping the minutes, recording the decisions, and actually owning the outcomes.
Document everything.
And most importantly, you have to actively encourage honest advice, even and especially when it is deeply uncomfortable to hear.
Because the alternative is relying on a few powerful individuals who just bypass the entire system through sheer force of personality. Which brings this entire deep dive right back to you, the listener. We started by imagining a historical crisis, but these dynamics play out every single day in boardrooms, hospitals, and corporate offices.
Oh, everywhere. I want to leave you with this final thought.
Go ahead.
Think about the organizations, the companies, or the institutions that you are a part of right now. Look at how decisions are actually made.
Yeah.
Are the feedback loops in your world strong enough to survive a charismatic, powerful, but fundamentally flawed leader? Or are those systems designed to just quietly agree, smile, and nod until the disaster strikes?
Because wars and massive organizational failures aren't just about what happens on the front lines, they are about the people in the room. And what happens when the people in the room are absolutely terrified to write anything down. Keep digging deeper.